Well, the Auditor-General has found major problems with the government's home insulation scheme. The scheme was scrapped in February because of safety concerns and fraud. To discuss this and other political matters, I'm joined by our afternoon live Polly's panel for a Friday. Here in the studio is Labour's Stephen Jones and in Melbourne, Liberal MP Josh Frydenberg. Welcome to both of you.
Good afternoon, Ellie. Good afternoon, Josh.
Josh Frydenberg, if I can start with you. The Auditor-General, as we just said, has found the home insulation scheme caused considerable suffering. It was expensive. We knew all of that. But certainly it seems the department and not the minister has come in for the steepest criticism.
No, I don't accept that. What has happened is totally unacceptable. But Peter Garrett was warned 26 times. He was told that this program would take 5 years to roll out. But they persisted, and the Auditor-General has made very clear on page 27 that the stimulus objectives overrode risk management practices. That's unacceptable. Peter Garrett should resign, or Julia Gillard should sack him immediately.
Stephen Jones.
Well, what I think this report shows is some of the outrageous things that have been said about and to Peter Garrett as a minister over the last 18 months have absolutely no basis. I agree with Josh. Some of the things that have gone on with the administration of this scheme are unacceptable, which is why we commissioned a review and why in February this year we closed down the scheme. But the Auditor-General has clearly said at all times the minister acted on the best advice available to him. Unfortunately, too often, that advice wasn't up to scratch.
But he lost his job over it.
Well, he was allocated a new portfolio and a fresh set of eyes were brought to bear on it, and somebody was able to focus on the scheme.
Excuses, Stephen. Excuses.
You'll get your chance, Josh. We put in place...
I want my chance.
We put in place a review of the scheme and addressed all of the issues that were raised by the Hawke Review. And in fact, the Auditor-General spends quite some time in this review acknowledging the steps that have been put in place to deal with those problems.
Josh Frydenberg?
Julia Gillard's made a mockery of ministerial accountability. Who's to blame? Who's going to take the responsibility here for Peter Garrett's mistakes? And as Stephen said, he's got now responsibility for schools, but they haven't even given him responsibility for another failed program, which was the BER. I mean, I don't know what Stephen feels like Parliament's like joining the Labor Party now, because this is a government that's just lurching from one mistake to another. It's pretty much in free fall, and I think, you know, someone's got to take the blame here.
Stephen Jones, where does the concept of ministerial responsibility fall here? I mean, if a department is giving incorrect advice, once upon a time the minister would have taken the fall for the department.
No, that's not quite true. If the minister has misled Parliament, yes, the minister must resign. But if the minister is acting on the basis of the advice that is given to him by his department, and it is later found out that
he was warned 26 times. He was warned 26 times.
It's later found out that that advice is incorrect. I mean, you can't blame the minister for taking and acting in good faith on the best advice available to him.
What about the issue, though, that the minister was warned, but even over and above that, the recommendation from the department was that this program went over 5 years. Because of the requirement for it to be a stimulatory impact on the economy, it was brought forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely it was brought forward, and when the department was advised that this is the government's preference, no advice came back to the minister at that point in time that they could not meet those objectives.
Fair point, Josh Frydenberg?
No, Ali, what I find unbelievable is the 1.1 million homes have not even been fully checked. So this government has not only failed in its original application of this program, but it continues to fail the Australian people. Peter Garrett does not deserve to be a minister. He should be sacked, doesn't matter what his portfolio is, and Julia Gillard should take on this idea of ministerial responsibility in her government.
Yeah. Let me just correct some of the factual errors there in what Josh has said. Firstly, over 200,000 homes have either been inspected or committed to be inspected. Every house with foil insulation, and that's where the vast majority of the problems exist, are with the foil insulation home.
Not every house.
Will receive an inspection. And anybody who thinks that they have an issue or a concern with their insulation that's been put in under this scheme is entitled to an inspection.
So you're saying not too slow?
No, absolutely. If you're going to do it, you do it properly.
You're saying this is not over, Josh Frydenberg?
Absolutely not, and they haven't even told the people whose houses they've inspected whether there's a problem. I mean, fancy that. They send in the government to inspect these homes that they made a mess of in the first place, and they won't even tell them if there are problems. It's just unbelievable.
That's just simply not true, Josh. A person who has their home inspected is generally on site, on the premises at the time the inspection occurs. It's a standard inspection, and they're advised what the outcome is.
Let's move on to water, another very big issue for both sides of politics. The Murray-Darling consultations continue. We saw some very vigorous consultations in Griffith, and today less vigorous, it seems, in Renmark. And now there is a parliamentary inquiry, and I'm wondering, Stephen Jones, how this is going to work, because it would seem that the inquiry is likely to report before the Murray-Darling Basin Authority actually comes out with its final plan. How's the government going to marry the two?
I think the chairman of that inquiry made it quite clear, the chairman being Tony Windsor, made it quite clear that they have some capacity for some flexibility in the reporting timelines on that parliamentary inquiry. But a couple of key points that need to be made here. And I've gone to the trouble of bringing along with me today a copy of the second reading speech made by Malcolm Turnbull when he was the minister who introduced the legislation, the water bill legislation, which set up the Murray-Darling Authority. And I can't find much in that second reading speech that I or any other member of the Labor Party would disagree with. And what it says is that up until 2010, we had a bipartisan approach. We had a bipartisan approach to management of water issues in the Murray-Darling Basin. And the question for Josh and the question for the Liberal Party is, Tony Abbott going to depart from that bipartisan approach? Is going to put politics ahead of science and economics and try and turn this into a political football? Is he going to try and wreck this in the same way he's trying to wreck everything else?
Josh Frydenberg, it is true, is it not, that it was really the John Howard beast? I mean, it was born in the John Howard days.
Well, let me say something. I don't know if Stephen's got a copy of the Water Act in front of him, but he should check Section 44. And what Section 44 says is that the Minister has the flexibility to implement the recommendations he wants out of this Murray-Darling Basin report. So why did Julia Gillard go to the last election telling the Australian people she would implement the recommendations holus bolus, and now she's going through with some sort of consultation process? Well, that's just not good enough. If you make a promise, now she's walking away from it. What we're saying is we need sustainable water. We need sustainable water practices, but we can't walk away from these communities. And what we want is the Productivity Commission to have a proper report into the socio-economic impact of this Murray-Darling Basin Authority report.
So, Stephen Jones, you say fair question. What's the answer?
The answer is the Murray-Darling Basin Authority hasn't released a report with recommendations in it. What it has said is we are going out with a draft of a plan to consult with the communities who are affected. And I've got to say, for a representative of a party who spent the most part of the last 3 years criticising the former government for conducting reviews into everything willy-nilly, to seriously sit there and propose that the answer to this is to set up another body to set up another review is just risible. We've got a process, we've got an expert body that was set up by your party, bipartisan approach by your party to manage the issues of the science and the economics and the social implications of water reform in the Murray-Darling Basin. The question is, are you now walking away from that bipartisan approach?
Haven't you just announced a parliamentary inquiry? Haven't you just done that yesterday? I mean, who's announcing another inquiry?
The issue is that the Parliament, as you know full well, has the capacity to inquire into all manner of things, and it will do that. But that does not supplant or replace the statutory responsibility of the body set up by John Howard, agreed to by a cabinet which contained Malcolm Turnbull and Tony Abbott, which said the Murray-Darling Basin will determine a plan in the interest of the nation, not any one state or not any one segment of the industry.
Will the Coalition take part in this parliamentary inquiry?
Look, I don't know what Tony Abbott is, the announcements he's going to make in relation to that, but the point here is
You're not an astrologer, Josh. How could you know?
John Howard allocated $10 billion and put in place important initiatives to protect the water in that area. And what this government has failed to do is to roll out that infrastructure quickly and effectively. It's had an ad hoc approach to the buybacks. Now it's got these recommendations from the Murray-Darling Basin Authority report, and we have this promise from Julia Gillard in the days leading up to the election that she's going to implement the recommendations holus bolus.
Stephen Jones, has Julia Gillard, and indeed the minister at the time, backed Labor into a corner because it was an open-ended commitment to support whatever the plan puts out or whatever the Basin Authority puts out. And while it is only a guide to a draft to a plan, the authority is very clear that all they're really discussing is whether it's 3,000 or 4,000 gigalitres. The parameters are there.
Absolutely not. And what the Prime Minister is committed to doing is ensuring that our policy and our position on this is based on the best evidence and the best science, the best economic evidence available, and that's why John Howard set up the Murray-Darling Basin Authority to bring together that body of evidence and to consult with the community. I think it's nothing more than common sense to say that you will adopt the outcomes of that expert and deliberative process.
And that doesn't lock them in, though?
No, well, it does not. It does nothing more. It does nothing more than say that the government will operate on the basis of the best evidence available.
We are going to almost run out of time, and I've got something else that I do want to ask because I've discovered something that I certainly wasn't aware of. Next week Parliament sits, and we're slated to get that debate on Afghanistan, which was promised before the end of the year. It's due to start on Tuesday, but Josh Frydenberg, you won't be taking part.
Well, my maiden speech, or first speech, is scheduled for Monday the 25th of October. So if the debate ends at the end of next week, it's convention that those who have not made their maiden speech cannot participate in such a debate. That's unfortunate, but I accept that they're the conventions and it's not a conspiracy by anyone.
No, I'm sure it's not a conspiracy, but would you like to see, given that we have not had a debate, certainly in recent times, about a commitment to a theatre of war, is it, do you think, an occasion where perhaps those conventions could be moved around?
Look, that's not a decision for me. I'm sure both sides are affected by it. There will be plenty of opportunities in this coming Parliament for me to speak on a range of foreign policy issues, which is a passion of mine. But I'm not scheduled for my first speech till the 25th.
And Stephen, what about you?
I'm making my first speech on Tuesday this week and hoping to put my name on the list to speak in the debate on Afghanistan.
So the debate starts in the afternoon, you speak in the evening, and you're free to have
it'll continue on throughout the course of the week. And I think in terms of the debate on Afghanistan, what I'm looking forward to is some clarification on the coalition's positions, because we've seen about 3 or 4 of them over the last week. We've got Tony Abbott wanting to be an armchair general, the digger who'll never pull a trigger, but he's got an opinion on everything. I wonder what his opinion's going to be in the debate next week.
We have a Prime Minister who has politicised the deployment by leaking out there that Tony Abbott didn't come with her to Afghanistan, knowing well full that he was going there the following week. And then we've had a Prime Minister who's told the world she's not interested in foreign policy at a time when we have troops in the field, at a time when foreign policy is at the top of the agenda. This is just also unacceptable.
I think what Julia Gillard has shown in the first month of her Prime Ministership in the 43rd Parliament, the 143rd Parliament, is she has an eye fairly and squarely on domestic policy, but she will not shake her duty to international affairs.
And there, I thought we were going to finish on a bipartisan note about the silliness of parliamentary conventions, but no. Anyway, thank you very much, gentlemen. Josh Frydenberg in Melbourne and Stephen Jones in
Sydney.
Great to be with you. Thank you very much. And good luck with your maiden speeches.
Thank you.
Well, we're moving